Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This week in Warzone Science, we're going to be talking about the best type of optic that you can be using for each type of build. In this video, I'm actually going to be differentiating between PC and default/console settings because I know that people play on different platforms, on different settings, and I want to make sure that each player has a chance to know exactly how their build should be working and what applies to them. Before I get into which side is best for which build, I'm going to talk about some important sight stats which you may have not considered before when picking a sight. In my last video about optics, I talked about how whenever you increase your sight's zoom, usually your FOV zoom increases, which means you get less peripheral vision. When considering zoom optics, this is especially important because you gotta make sure that the FOV zoom is worth the amount of zoom that you actually zoom in with your sight. From the left and middle pictures, you can see that the zoom difference isn't that much, but the FOV zoom is, and it being a hollow sight, it'll have a greater ADS impact. Here I've put 3 screenshots on top of each other showing you how much less FOV or peripheral vision you're getting when using a red dot/iron sight, a holographic sight, and the VLK. So you gotta ask yourself, is that extra bit of zoom worth that less FOV? And depending on your build type, it just might, but we'll get to that soon. And the last important stat to talk about is effective recoil. Usually, the more zoom you have, the more effective recoil you're gonna have, unless it's a sight like the VLK, which has built-in recoil reduction. To find your build's effective recoil, all you gotta do is multiply its final recoil by the FOV zoom. So if we're looking at a red dot sight, it would zoom in the FOV by 1 time, and if we don't have any attachments that add or reduce recoil, our final recoil would be 1. So 1 times 1 equals effective recoil of 1. And if we compare my 1 times effective recoil at 100 FOV to default or console FOV, it would seem like I had 0.71 times or 29% less effective recoil. So when considering an optic, make sure to consider your FOV, how much the optic zooms and how much your FOV changes, and the effective recoil. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised that I'm going to recommend iron sights or reflex sights for builds specializing in close range. So this is close range assault rifles and SMGs. These types of builds are usually paired with a more long range weapon and usually are effective within 35 meters. Under 30 meters, you definitely don't need any zoom, so irons and red dots are perfect. This is because you would have the maximum amount of peripheral vision, you would be able to stay on target a lot easier, and you would have the least amount of effective recoil. When fighting in close quarters, being able to aim down your sights first often means that you can put out your shots first more accurately and you'll usually get the kill. So by using a red dot or irons, you'll have the least amount of ADS penalty. If you're on default or console settings, do not put a zoom optic on a close range build because your zoom is already equivalent to a holographic sight on a higher FOV. That being said, if you're playing on a higher FOV and don't mind losing your advantage, you can put on a holographic sight and still be on par with default settings. Just don't be surprised if you end up being beat by someone with irons or a red dot. Mid-range builds aren't and have never really been that popular, but they do exist, and they're there so that when the enemies start getting too close for your sniper rifle, you can take them out before they enter close quarters range. If for some reason they do end up getting into close quarter range, you're at a pretty big disadvantage. Because you're going to be engaging targets between 20 and 50 meters, zoom actually matters here. So in order to pick an optic, you gotta look at your FOV. On console and default settings, your irons and red dots actually have enough zoom for this distance. If you need a little bit more zoom, you can go all the way up to a holographic sight. On higher FOV, in order to match a default or console's iron sights, we gotta use a holographic sight. And in order to match their holographic sight, we gotta use a VLK, and when we do this, we get the added benefit of recoil reduction. However, if you're on console or default settings, do not use a VLK because the amount that it zooms in, both FOV and actual zoom, is way too much for what we're trying to do here. Just remember for either platform that if they do end up getting too close, you probably will start hip firing and it won't matter which optic you have. Despite not being the #1 build type in Warzone currently, long range builds always have been and always will be included in the top Warzone loadouts. This is because they focus on extreme accuracy over long distance. They may not have the greatest time to kill, but a great TTK means nothing if the shots can't hit. While some may get away with using iron sights on their long range builds, especially those on default settings or on console, I strongly recommend using a zoom optic. This is because zoom optics allow you to see things a lot closer, like people head glitching, or those that like to mount on walls. And when you're trying to counter snipe, it's a lot easier this way, especially considering some zoom optics have the exact same zoom as some sniper scopes. And for both platforms, this time I'm recommending pretty much the same thing. You want as much zoom as possible, and since the VLK does give you that recoil reduction, why not use that? The canted hybrid also gives you this recoil reduction, and many other zoom sights do too. Just whatever you do not use the sniper scope, because why would you want glint? Long range build will always be paired with the close quarters weapon, even if you have a hybrid sight, because that hybrid sight won't help you if your aim down sight time is way too long. Finally, we've got the balance build. It's the jack of all trades. It'll help you in close quarters, and it will stretch out to a longer range. It won't beat an SMG, and it won't beat a long range AR, and you probably shouldn't be challenging snipers with it, but no matter the situation, if you got the skill, it will come through. So for those on console or default settings, I'm recommending anything between iron sights all the way up to the APX5 holographic sight. On higher FOVs, while you could technically start with irons and red dots, I would start with the aim off reflex, and if you want that extra range, you can go to the VLK in order to match the console/default zoom. For both platforms, I recommend finding the minimum amount of zoom that you need. Sure, there will be times where you wish you had more zoom, but if you did, you would have less peripheral vision, and your performance in close quarters would really suffer. Just because I listed holos and VLKs here though, doesn't mean that you should use them. If you do use them though, make sure that your ADS time is competitive enough. A good balanced build is very difficult to create. It takes a lot of trial and error, and it's tailored towards one specific person. So what may work for you may not work for another person. And in order to use it, you gotta really know your build. Sure, someone could use it and be pretty good, but if you wanna be really good and beat the people with SMGs and snipers, you gotta know exactly how it behaves. Sure, that goes for basically any other build, but just because it's good at everything doesn't mean it's the best at any single area. So basically, don't put a red dot on a long range build, and don't put a VLK on a close quarters build. You wanna work with your build, not against it. If you want to make a balanced build, go for a balanced build, but don't lie to yourself saying that it's a close quarters or a long range build. Or don't lie to yourself that your balanced build isn't a long range build or a close quarters build. Pair it with a proper weapon, and you'll find yourself being more prepared, and in turn, winning more gunfights. If you want me to cover a topic or rate your build using my system, all you gotta do is leave a comment on here or Instagram, and you may find yourself on the next Community Wednesday video. So that's the video. If you have enjoyed it or if it's helped you anyway, please hit like. If you got any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section down below, and if you want to make sure that you never miss another video, be sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.